Growing a business is kind of tricky right now. Supply chains are squeezed, tariffs and trade policies are dynamic, and cash flow, it's tighter than ever. You need clarity to come out on top. Without it, you risk falling behind. If only you could hop in the DeLorean and see the future, right? Thankfully, there's NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite has real-time forecasting to help you move ahead with confidence. This is your AI-powered business management suite and the #1 cloud ERP. Trusted by over 42,000 businesses, NetSuite brings accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR all under one roof. It's your single source of truth, giving you the data and control you need to move quickly. And with AI built in, you can automate the busy work and focus on strategy. NetSuite helps you see what's stuck, what it's costing you, and how to pivot fast. If I were running a business with a lot of moving parts, I'd use NetSuite for full control over everything. Tame the chaos with NetSuite. If your revenues are at least in 7 figures, download the free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders at netsuite.com/SPI. That's netsuite.com/SPI. The perfect product launch. It's the goal for every brand marketer. High heat, fast sellout, and fans posting recipes like trophies. What do Sydney Sweeney's soap drop, Taylor Swift's tickets, and your next launch have in common? Well, they're not bought, they're bragged about. Fanfare turns your drop into a moment. Fanfare cues real fans, blocks bots, and builds launch experiences worth screenshotting. Want hype without the heartbreak? Get Fanfare's 5-step hype drop playbook with our proven success formula and make your next launch unforgettable at fanfare.io/playbook. Again, fanfare.io/playbook.
Because there's actually no such thing as cheating in this world. You've got to find some advantage that you have that everybody else who's knocking on the same doors doesn't have. Whether it's because you buy a tool that most people don't know exists and you leverage that, whether it's because you email every human being you've ever met on planet Earth, you have to find something that is unique to you, some piece of your experience, some piece of your story, some piece of your history, something that's special. You have to figure out how to use that to make your experience, your company, your business, your side hustle, how to make it different, how to make it special.
What are your unfair advantages? These are the things that you have that others don't, the things that you even have access to that others don't, or something that is perhaps often difficult for others to do that for some reason you are just much better at. These are the things that we need to take advantage of. And we're going to talk about those kinds of things today with a real life case study of somebody who's created successful businesses, one of them being a board game. This person was not a board game designer before creating one of the most successful board games ever. And then later, a physical product that turned into something that helps thousands, if not millions of people build their own businesses from the comfort of their own home. That thing being the Glowforge. If you've ever heard of a Glowforge, perhaps you are a parent of a young child who is in school that has access to a Glowforge, or maybe you've just heard the story of the most successful and most backed campaign ever on Kickstarter, or at least at one point it was. The Glowforge is amazing. It's a laser cutting tool that could allow you to create your own business at home, physical product business. And it's done so for many, many others. We're talking with the founder of Glowforge, the creator of Robot Turtles, which is that board game, and the story behind that and the sort of the pushback he got from the game board community as a result of this, and more, and a lot of lessons for us entrepreneurs, whether you're doing physical products or digital products. Dan Shapiro, who also has a book that you should check out. We're going to discuss all that here in this podcast episode today. It is episode 737 of the Smart Passive Income Podcast. Appreciate you joining me today, listening, because this is a great one with Glowforge founder, Dan Shapiro.
You're listening to the Smart Passive Income Podcast, a proud member of the Entrepreneur Podcast Network, a show that's all about working hard now so you can sit back and reap the benefits later. And now your host. He says one of the biggest regrets he's had in his life is participating in the One Chip Challenge. Pat Flynn.
Running a business means legal questions are inevitable. Is this contract or agreement solid? What can I do if a client won't pay me? Am I set up properly for taxes? Well, rather than trying to navigate all of this on your own or searching endlessly online, imagine having a law firm on your side without the high hourly rates. That's exactly what Legal Shield's small business plans offer. With Legal Shield, entrepreneurs get access to real legal support, contract reviews, collection letters, guidance on business formation, and even help handling IRS audits. Members can book consultations, upload documents through the app, and work with a provider law firm that understands small business laws in your state. You also get proactive help on tax and trademark questions so you can stay ahead of legal risks. And if a client delays payment, Legal Shield can send professional collection letters to help you recover what you're owed, all for a fraction of what traditional attorneys charge. Go to LegalShield.com/SPI or call 833-570-9980 to learn more and get big business legal support without a big business budget. That's LegalShield.com/SPI. Hiring shouldn't be a hassle or a drain on your budget. Upwork is your one-stop shop to find, hire, and pay top freelance talent, saving you time and keeping costs in check all in one place. Companies at every stage turn to Upwork to get things done and find more flexibility in the way that they staff key projects and initiatives by assessing a global marketplace filled with top talent in IT, web development, AI, design, administration support, marketing, and more. And I've personally used them myself and can vouch for them. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, get help drafting a job post, or even book a consultation. From there, you connect with freelancers that get you and can easily hire them to take your business to the next level. Upwork makes the entire process easier, simpler, and more affordable with industry-low fees. Post a job today and hire tomorrow with Upwork. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com. Go there now. Dan, welcome to the SPI podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Pat. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. I probably mentioned this in the intro to this podcast, but the Glowforge is a big deal here in our community, at our schools. And not only that, you also invented a board game called Robot Turtles that has been a part of my family's life as well and is really cool. So thank you for all that you've done and all that you've built and created for the world.
Thank you, Pat. It means so much to me to know I have an impact on like real people out in the world. It's easy to go through and do your job and sometimes just feel like you're just a little piece of something. And it's so powerful to know that something you've created gets to actually get out into the world and have an impact. It warms my heart.
For sure. And I think that's why people listening are doing what they are doing, right? Whatever it is that they're building, they're creating. Why do you create? What is the desire for you for doing what you do?
It's a great question. I've always been a tinkerer, out in the garage, taking things apart and failing to put them back together. I wasn't a very good tinkerer, but I was always trying and always patching things together. And when I was in college, I wound up helping pay for school by building laser shows, like, Pink Floyd, The Wall at the Planetarium type laser shows, little ones, and selling them on the early internet, which turned into a DJing business. But it actually started just because I liked building these things and people sort of saw it and were like, oh, can we buy your laser shows? Can we hire you to do a laser show? Will you play some music while you're doing that at our party? Which is probably my first sort of big entrepreneurial experience. And, even when I went into software, although my real first love was building physical things, I kind of got sucked into the world of software. The thing that was magical about it was I could leave an imprint on the world. I could actually do things and make things that impacted me and the people around me. And that was so gratifying. So if I look through sort of the arc of my life, so many of the opportunities that I've had have come because I knew how to make things. Yeah. Because I had that set of skills. And I'd say the second half of my professional career has been all about figuring out how to give that gift to others.
I love that. And you've written books, you've helped coach different businesses, you've had an immensely successful Kickstarter campaign with the Glowforge, and we'll dive into that in a little bit. But I'm curious, because you told a story about, just really wanting to build. You're building these laser shows, you're a builder, a lot of my audience is builders, but there's often a disconnect between the building and the fascination for that and the love of that, and then like, now I got to turn it into a business. And that often drives them away from the thing that they were initially passionate about. What has kept you a successful entrepreneur, yet still doing the passionate things that you love to do?
Well, for every one that's worked, there's 3 or more that haven't. And that's probably one of the most important things to remember, right? Like every overnight success was followed by many, many, many long nights of failure. In fact, part of the reason why I wrote a book called Hot Seat, the Startup CEO Guidebook. And part of the reason I did that was because so many of the entrepreneurship stories I heard were like, it's so easy. You do this, that, and the other, success. And all the interviews with CEOs were like, here's how, the inevitable rise. I read, there's a book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which was it Andreessen or Horowitz wrote it. And in chapter 3, he'd already taken the company public. And I was like, I feel like you skipped a lot there. And I actually wanted to look at those earliest stages at getting things going. So when I've worked with dozens of early stage startups through things like Founders Institute and Techstars. And for example, the number one cause of young companies dying is founders not getting along. The founders couldn't reach decisions, that they got frustrated with each other. It's usually not what's listed. Usually what's listed is like ran out of money, because that's always the reason, or, dissolved to pivot, whatever. But when you get down to it, like if you're close enough to know what's really going on at a startup and the startup fails, it's almost always that founder strife is a piece of it. And nobody talks about it. So like my first company started as Ontella, turned into PhotoBucket. My co-founder and I were arguing constantly. And there are 3 co-founders eventually. We added a third. And we were constantly arguing. And I felt like a complete idiot. I'm like, my goal is to manage a company of, dozens and then hundreds of people. And I can't even like take 2 friends and have us line up on what to do. I had no idea that was normal. I had no idea that was essential. Because if we couldn't work out those problems when it was just the 3 of us in my basement, like, on a shoestring, then we had no hope of doing it. And that if we could, that if we paid our dues and did the work to figure out how to work together, to assign responsibilities instead of everybody having their thumb in every pie, that would actually pay off and make the company more robust to shine. I didn't know that because nobody was talking about that. So part of my book was just to document those stories, not just mine, although I tell some of mine, but so many other stories of startups that did and didn't make it, so that people could see how that stuff really happens and know when they're doing it themselves, it's not just you. Like, yeah, everybody that I know has failures. Everybody that I know has those challenges, those interpersonal strife. The only companies that don't are the one-person companies.
Yeah, right. That's super valuable and really amazing insight. First of all, you'd mentioned PhotoBucket. I remember PhotoBucket from way back in the day. That's so wild. And so I'm curious, what questions should have come up or should have been asked amongst those founders that didn't, that perhaps would have set it up for better success?
The 3 of us founded a company that was all about cloud services for camera phones. This is in the pre-iPhone era. That would automatically sync your images and eventually other files to cloud services, to your computer, et cetera. And later, I actually, in a weird transaction, I bought PhotoBucket from Fox Interactive, merged the companies into a single company, which is still the company that's been operating on and off for the past decade and a half. But I left shortly after that went through. The pain that we went through in those first, I'll go to the first 9 months, was unbelievable. So I was the CEO, I was a full-time CEO, and my number one job was fundraising. Like, that was it. And I probably spent a third to a half of my time on nothing more than fundraising. And having read all the blog posts, there were not a lot of folks posting about venture capital in 2005, but I read Brad Feld and his book about venture deals, which is still the best book in the industry, read his book religiously, read his blog posts, which were very transparent, some of the other folks who were there, and concluded that, okay, I get this done in 3 months. And everybody I talked to was like, yep, it's going to take 3 months. 3 months over time, like in 3 months, you find a lead, you bring in the rest around, you close it. Took me 9 months before I found the first investor who was willing to do the deal. For 9 months, we were working with no pay in my basement, trying to build this thing. With me, I'm supposed to switch over to doing like CEO stuff and product and everything else. And fundraising is it. And I am beating my head against a wall. And from the day I started fundraising until the day that the first check cleared, I had no idea, like, it didn't seem like we were making any progress. Some folks who've done this and tried to raise outside capital may know it's not this like, people say, well, you have this funnel and you take them from this and steps and then to close. Yeah, no, it was just talk. Sure, I'm interested, like, week 2, I'm totally interested. I have just 3 things to do. They never invested. Week 6, I get blown off by some investor who's supposed to be an expert in our area, who's in our backyard, who's loves this sort of thing and won't even return my, like, after the second email, won't take a meeting, and on and on and on. And I said to myself, if I ever figure this out, I'm going to write it down so other people don't have to suffer. I will share the secret when I figure it out. And you know what the secret was? I still don't. After 9 months, I was at a random conference and spotted the guy who blew me off in week 6 and went up and started. And this is a conference in Barcelona. It was like the largest wireless conference in the world. And I went there to try and shake some investments loose. Went up to this guy, pretended I didn't know who he was, started chatting. Oh, you're from Seattle. Oh, what a small world. Oh, you're in wow, what a small world. We should talk sometime. That was the first check that cleared and the one that catalyzed everything else to come together. And like there was no process. There was no magic. It was just basically bashing my head against the wall until I made a hole in it. And I could have just as easily quit after month 3, month 8, it would have looked the same. And that's what's so frustrating, which is when you are trying to make something from nothing, and particularly if you are relying on the others to do it, if you're relying on fundraising, you're just putting yourself very much at the hands of the world and working for a long time before you see any results with very little feedback. That's been my experience.
What's the origin of motivation during those rough times? What kept you going and not?
Delusion.
I
kept thinking, yes. I was like, this is going to be easy. Like I've seen it, not easy. This is going to be totally achievable with hard work. This is not random. This is like if I just follow the steps, if I just do the things everybody says, I'm sure it'll work out. It's a good idea. I've got a good team. Like surely it'll all work out. And, after 9 months, the delusion was starting to waver and I was starting to lose faith. And, had that gone another 3 months, I might have given up and thrown in the towel. You kind of have to, it's like trying to make it in Hollywood. You kind of have to be a little ignorant to the odds, or you have to be so absolutely motivated that understanding the odds doesn't dissuade you. Because if you actually look at our country produces venture-backed companies at a less frequently than it produces Olympians.
That's crazy.
If you are betting on the odds of becoming an Olympian versus a venture-backed CEO, you're better off trying to get into the Olympics.
That is a wild stat.
And right. It doesn't happen that much. So if that's your dream, it either has to be because you're a dreamer and you don't know the reality, good measure of that, or because you're so pig-headed that you're going to do it even though you're probably going to fail. Also me.
Yeah. Persistence obviously is key. You got to keep giving yourself shots or else, the only thing, we can't predict the future, but the only way to predict it is to just stop. And then, you've basically gave up and yeah, that's one way to predict it.
But, and I bet a lot of your listeners know this, the odds are very different when you take matters into your own hands. When you're launching a Kickstarter and it's just you, when you're launching a business and you're bootstrapping, suddenly you do control all the knobs. And while you have way fewer resources, and it is far more daunting because you're going it alone, it's validating to have people invest in you. It reduces risk to have people invest in you. It is so much harder. But it also means that you do control your own destiny. And there are a lot more small businesses that are self-started than there are venture capital-backed companies.
Yeah, the case for the solopreneur getting started and just helping a few people out. You can make a great living doing that and then choose to scale it up from there if you'd like. Speaking of Kickstarter, the Glowforge, I think, is the most successful Kickstarter campaign that ever existed, or at least one of them.
And technically not a Kickstarter. We did it on a self-hosted site that was a self-hosted crowdfunding campaign. But you're right. I believe it is still the most backed 30-day crowdfunding campaign for anything ever.
And how much did you make after 30 days?
$27.9 million.
$27.9 million. In your eyes, why was it so successful?
Let me go back. Let me tell you about my first Kickstarter, because that was where I learned all the fundamentals. And then Glowforge was an odd beast. Really an odd beast. I'm not sure I could tell you the magic that made Glowforge, but I think I can tell you the magic that made Robot Turtles. So let me go back to there and then I'll try and extrapolate. So I'll set the scene. I started a company called SparkBuy, which was a comparison shopping service. 6 months to the day after the company was incorporated, Google acquired it. The acquisition happened because of a random conversation I had with somebody on an airplane. If we have time, I can tell you that story. It's in my book, if not. And I worked at Google. I was the CEO of a wholly owned subsidiary called Google Comparison Inc. for a couple of years. And then I took a leave of absence to just spend a summer dorking around with my kids. So my twins at the time were 4. They're now 15. At the time they're 4. And they were interested in board games. I love board games. And Candyland was a fate worse than death. I did not want to play Candyland with my children. So I'm like, I'm going to invent a board game. And I had this sort of half-baked idea. I've always been a terrible programmer. I've always been a programmer and I've always been kind of terrible at it. As a side note, with GPT-4, I'm a very productive, terrible programmer, which is a lot more fun. But I was, would always go in and sort of dabble. And every time I would do it, I would think about how these programs were really designed for people who know how to use them already, rather than programming languages designed to learn. Except there was one I remember from my childhood, a programming language called Logo, where you controlled a little square turtle and you move the turtle around the screen by saying, go forward, turn right, put down a pen, change the pen color, go forward, and you draw a line. And this is where I first learned to program in like third grade on an Apple IIe using Logo. And somehow these two ideas got like twisted up in my head. And I was like, I'm going to make a board game about programming. And what is the most fun thing for a 4-year-old to do in the entire world? Boss around their parents. And what is computer programming? It's bossing around a computer. So the whole notion of the game at its very core is going to be teaching kids that programming isn't about learning or studying or being bossed around by technology. It's about taking control of technology and making it do what you want. And teaching kids that it's not that computers are hard because they're smarter than you. Computers are hard because they're dumber than you. And you have to explain to them in painstaking detail how to get what you want. So the whole idea of the game is that the parent is the computer, and the parent is very literal and very dumb and has to do exactly what the kids do and make silly noises while they do it. And the kids use a programming language, which is just cards. They don't have any words on them, with pictures, and they lay down one instruction at a time, and the parent has to do whatever the kid says. So the kid's bossing around the parent to go win the game. And I played this with my kids, and they loved it. And I gave it to some friends, and they played it with their kids, and they loved it. And through a weird side thing, I was working with a friend of mine, a guy named Alon Lee, helping him pitch a TV show. And part of the TV show had a crowdfunding angle to it. And I was like, I should actually run a crowdfunding campaign. And, I was the crowdfunding expert in there. I never run a Kickstarter. So I was like, I should do that. And I thought this will be a great opportunity. So I was sort of prepared the artwork and the design and got everything ready. And there was a foundational moment when I was talking to a friend who runs a small board game company. And I explained the idea of the game to her, and she said, oh, shoot, yeah, that would never fly with any board game publisher. I said, well, how come? They don't like educational games? She said, no, because board game publishers know from experience that parents want a game that lets them stop parenting. The goal of a board game is to send the kids off into the corner to leave the parent alone. So the idea of a board game that centers around the parent would never fly. You could never get it published. I said, could I please use you as my rallying cry? Can I please say that the board game experts told me this is a game that could never get made and would only get made if you, the people of Kickstarter, the people who want this game, will it into in existence? And she's like, oh yeah, that's a great,
That's
yes,
wonderful.
Go use me as the boogeyman and go forth and succeed, which was the rallying cry for the product. So this is all going on. You said, why do things work? Here's why. It's because it had the simplest pitch imaginable. A board game that teaches programming principles to preschoolers. 90% of people would say, I don't care. And 10% of people would leap in and say, tell me more. It's the best thing to have, a polarizing product, because you don't want to waste time with the people who are ambivalent. You want people to select in or out. The second thing was, it was something people wanted, but it was also a cause. Because I could truly say, this will not exist except for you. You are a part of this. You are helping me bring it into the world. You're not just transacting a thing. You're changing the world in a small way through your support by bringing this into the world. And so that let people lean forward. And finally, it was just something different. It was something weird and interesting. I wound up getting outreach from NPR 2 weeks into the 4-week campaign. And it was Elise Hugh, who's since become a friend. And she reached out to me on Facebook and was like, this is amazing. This is so cool. I'd love to do a piece about robot turtles and crowdfunding. My brother works for NPR. He's the host of All Things Considered, Dan Shapiro. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. Did I assume Ari told you about this? And she's like, Dan Shapiro's your brother? Oh, well, I have to write a disclaimer about this in the piece because I had no idea the family of an NPR. So she just found out about it totally organically. That piece on NPR drove from Robot Turtles at the time was the most backed board game in Kickstarter history, more backers than any other game. And that was the piece, that NPR piece was what drove it over. But the reason that happened was because it was something interesting and novel and different, and it grabbed people's attention. And so that trifecta, it was something people wanted. It was something people wanted to exist. And it was something that was interesting that people would tell their friends about, that piqued people's curiosity, was the sort of virtuous flywheel that drove the success of that product.
And over 13,000 backers, $630,000 generated. I ran a Kickstarter campaign with my videographer. We invented a specialized tripod, and it made $413K in 60 days.
That's huge.
I was very proud of that, and we didn't do it alone. We had a lot of help from people who've been successful on Kickstarter, so thank you. But I remember what it was like. It's like, okay, like people are like, you made this much money, and we're like, no, because this is all going to be spent on making the molds now and doing the things. Like $630K coming in. What was going through your head as far as, okay, now I got to deliver on this thing? How do you make sure that happens well?
So my original plan was, I think I put the number at 10K, but my secret goal was 50K, right? That was if I get to 50K, and the way it worked was at 10K, I would lose money, and my summer internship was going to be learning Kickstarter. And at 50K, I would just shy of break even. I'd still lose a little money, but it's like a mostly subsidized internship. And once it got up to 600K, I said, oh my gosh, I'm in the board game business.
Yeah.
I did not mean to be. Now I have a real project. I'm going to have to devote a year of my life to do this. This isn't something I can do in a small batch. I'm going to have to do a much larger production run. I have to figure out the distribution and everything else. And I did wind up, when all was said and done, Robot Turtles, the crowdfunding campaign, I made some money off of it. I made about a third or a fourth as much as I would have worked in a full-time job during that time, but I made some money off of it. And then in the I'm getting a little off topic, but in the afterlife, I licensed it to an amazing board game company who still sells it to this day. And I get royalty checks. And I'm like, to ultimately the reason everybody's here, I don't do anything. And that's licensing income that supports me and my family and has been for the past decade. And
that's amazing.
Hopefully will for years to come. But at the time, it was my full-time job to figure out how to deliver this. And I can tell this story two ways. First way I'll tell it is like Dan, what a rube, which is I literally went to Google right before I launched the campaign and Googled board game companies and called the first and second and third Google results and was like, how much does it cost to make a board game so I can price my Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Which sounds pretty podunk. But I'll tell you something that actually happened, and I'm foreshadowing a little bit Glowforge, the company that I've since started, and why I started it. I got on the phone with Delano Publishing, an amazing board game publisher based in the United States. And I said, here's the game. Tell me about costing. And they gave me an estimate. And then I said, okay, what can I do to make it cheaper? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, like I told you the cards were, this many cards, and I told you the pieces were this shape, but I can change that. Like I could make it a little bigger or smaller. I could make the board 18 by 18, 20 by 20, get rid of, this or that. And there was long silence. And she said, nobody's ever asked me that before. But let me tell you, 1.5 by 1.5 or any half-inch intervals, very inexpensive. As soon as you change from rounded rectangles, I have to do a custom piece. There's an extra surcharge. Cards, I'm going to print, if you say I have a deck of 30 cards, I'm going to print 52 cards and throw away 22 of them and recycle them because that's the way that the card machines work. So you get 52 cards for the price of one.
Yeah.
And then if you want 53, you're paying for two. And she went through the whole thing and I was like, oh, great. I'm going to make really minor changes to my game and have the production cost. And what do you mean nobody's ever asked you this before? She's like, everybody shows up
That's so surprising.
with like the vision in their head that's perfect and immaculate, and they don't want to hear about any changes. And I'm like, no, this is DFM. This is design for manufacturing. This is what you do. You figure out what the capabilities of your manufacturer are, and you design your product around it so that they can build it high quality inexpensively. And I will tell you something that happened months later, which was I was in the middle of the campaign had finished and I was, getting out copies or getting production going and everything. And I was doing some vanity Googling. I Googled Robot Turtles and was looking at where it was. And I found a board game forum, and of course, a board game designers forum. And of course, there's board game designers forum, but I hadn't thought of that. And they were talking about Robot Turtles, and they were talking about me. And they said, somebody posted, who's this Jack Banana? He didn't use the word Jack Banana, who is publishing a board game. There are hundreds of us here. We have been working for years, sometimes decades. We've been going to the toy shows. We've been doing the play tests. We've been doing everything we're supposed to do, and we've been beating our head against the wall for years. And this Yahoo, didn't say Yahoo, comes out of nowhere and publishes a game. Why does he get to do that and we don't?
Dang.
And I'm not proud. My first reaction was something along the lines of neener.
Yeah.
I didn't post it, but in my head. Then I started thinking about it. And I actually really started thinking about the privileges that I'd been granted. Vast majority of investment dollars go to white men in our society. Huge credit for that is totally unearned. Completely unfair advantage. I had parents who were both teachers. Both my parents are professors, raised in a home where I didn't have to worry about where meals were coming from. My parents supported entrepreneurship, wrote like not giant checks, but checks that without which it wouldn't have been possible to get started. Invested in me, metaphorically and literally, all these advantages that I thought about. And then I realized there was one more, which was I grew up knowing how to make things, how to make software, how to make physical things. And almost every opportunity in my life came about because I knew how to create things. And the whole goal of Robot Turtles was to give that ability to create code, to create things from software, to as many kids as possible. And when I made the decision to start the company Glowforge, which was a hard decision, spent months deciding if that's really what I wanted to commit to, the tiebreaker was that with Glowforge, now I could give people the ability to create physical things, beautiful things, things that would let them start their own businesses, to create the world around them the way they want. You know what? We have launched tens of thousands of businesses, tens of thousands of Kickstarters and Etsy stores and Saturday markets. That's beyond the crafter personal gifting. People who've actually, or existing business, people have actually created a business from the products that we've given. So when I talk to people about working at Glowforge, I'm like, this is a place where you get to pay it forward. You get to take the gift of creation that you were given and you get to give it to other people so that people can go create the world around them, create their own. Because you know what? It turns out it is so much easier to take something like a Glowforge Pro and create a business engraving custom cutting boards for realtors, or to create custom jewelry and earrings to sell at the local market to support your family, to create a puzzle business. We have a toy designer who's won international awards and became a full-time toy designer with the toy designs that she created on her Glowforge. And when you have those kinds of tools in your pocket, like any support, it can be what makes the difference. Like having your first investor, like having the first person who believes in you and wants to join forces with you. Having the right tool can make all the difference in the world. And that's the opportunity we have at Glowforge, is to create that tool that's never quite existed like that before.
I never thought about that. The idea that you are giving the opportunities that people never had the opportunity before to create using this tool. That is wonderfully powerful. And it's obvious that this is a really big motivator for you. And like you said, it's the tiebreaker for why creating it, because it's not an easy product. I mean, my Kickstarter campaign was 3 molds. You put them together and boom, you have this tripod. And that was already complicated. I mean, this thing has hundreds of pieces and it's electronic.
Over 500 pieces.
Yeah, 500 pieces. Like that just boggles my mind now that I know what that process of creating. This is why I love digital products so much. It's so much easier. Oh gosh, there's so many things I want to ask you when we have so much time. What was the first prototype like of the Glowforge, and what did it take to make that?
When I was working on Robot Turtles, I was trying to figure out how to make prototypes. And I stumbled into this backwater technology from the 60s called CNC laser cutting engraving. CNC laser cutting engraving was a way to use a laser to go create physical objects. All the rage at that point was 3D printing, but it was like plastic junk made slowly, which it kind of still is, like these lumpy plastic things. Or you could spend like hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a metal 3D printer, but then you couldn't do plastic. It was just one material. And lasers were amazing. They could work across hundreds of materials. They're super fast, print in minutes instead of hours. High resolution, 1,000 lines per inch, like a laser printer, like a traditional black and white laser printer. They could cut and score and engrave. And you could build real physical objects out of them. I got I made a doorstop because I needed a doorstop. It's one of the most boring things you can imagine, but whatever. It took me 2 minutes and 17 cents to create it instead of ordering it for $7 in 2 days on Amazon. When I, started working from home, I grabbed a piece of leather and I made a mouse pad. This is an antique hand-drawn map of the city of Seattle I got from the Library of Congress website. So it's really easy to create beautiful things. One thing led to another. I wound up with an industrial carbon dioxide cutting laser imported from a factory in China, installed in my garage, which was terrible. And I invited a bunch of entrepreneurs who I knew over to experiment with it and to make things for them and to show them how to make things. And they all thought I was nuts. But at the end of every one of those, coffee and laser dates, as my wife called them, I would hit the button and 2 minutes later out would be their engraved MacBook or a business card holder with their logo on it or something and say, okay, that was pretty cool. Mm. Like the whole fighting with the software that was still half in Chinese and, aligning the mirrors and cranking knobs and dials to make it work was awful. But the actual creative process was stunning. You might be onto something. And one of those folks said, hey, you should reconnect with the co-founder from my last company, Mark. You might remember him. We'd last met like 8 years ago. They just sold their company for $112 million a year ago. He's like, I don't know what Mark's up to. So we got together for lunch. I said to Mark, I've been thinking about, laser cutter engraver technology. And I explained briefly what it was and about what it would mean to make this affordable and put it in homes so that everybody had access to it. Because I think it's like giving everybody access to a factory, to the means of production, giving every person the ability to create. And Mark is a profoundly quiet person. If I'm on a phone call with Mark, I have a rule that I have to count to 10 before I say, are you still there? Because he's just very taciturn. We're a little opposites that way.
Yeah.
And he was silent this entire time. And then he said, I spent the last year in my garage since we sold the company building a combination plasma torch milling machine, 3D printer, and CNC laser cutter engraver. Could totally do this. A bolt of lightning. I was so shocked. Sometimes the universe lines up like that. And we spent 3 months discussing why we would do such a thing. Okay, so we're building a new tool company, a new tool for people like tools. That's not interesting. We're building this thing. What does it do? What impact does it have? Why would we spend our time and energy on such a difficult project? And the answers that came out of that was that Mark too felt like his ability to create things was a gift, and that bringing that into the world would change the world, could change the world from a place where things are made halfway across the earth in factories and shipped across the oceans and trucked in trucks to warehouses and delivered, maybe if you want one, to a world where it was faster and easier and better to make things for the purpose that they're needed, where and when they're needed. And that it could empower people across the country and globe to create things for themselves and create business and industry for themselves. And so after the end of 3 months, we said, yeah, I think we want to do this. And then Mark said, do you want to see the prototype? And I said, I'm sorry, what? Because I may have mentioned Mark doesn't talk a lot.
Yeah.
And I went in to his garage and I saw the 6 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot thing he built over the last year. And then I saw the first Glowforge, which if you took a Glowforge Pro and you stripped off all the plastics and glass and everything else, didn't look too different. The guy's a certifiable genius and figured out a whole host of, we now have over 45 patents on the various innovations that went into that. But many of those were cooked up at that very beginning. We've since piled on so much more, but he really created the vision for how such a thing could be created from the very outset. And that was how we brought that into the world.
Thank you for that. Wow. May I ask you about the brand name Glowforge? I think it's one of my favorite names of a company that best represents the thing that it creates. I love it so much. I'd love to know where that came from or who came up with that idea.
Funny story. We had a placeholder name for the company, and I set out on a process to name the company. And I'd done something similar with SparkBuy. I went to a crowdfunding website where you could crowdsource domain names that were available. And I put up a $500 prize for the best domain name and got 500 domain names. And so I went to Amazon Mechanical Turk. First I trimmed it down to like 50. Then I went to MTurk and had people check the boxes of the ones that they liked. And I used that data to narrow it down. then I narrowed it down to, I think, 5 finalists from that list. And then I did another survey where I asked people to describe what they thought each name was. Did they love it or hate it? And you got points for loving it, and you got a few points for hating it. You lost points for ambivalence. I wanted polarizing, not fine. And took those ratings and took those descriptions, and there was a clear winner out of that list. I should mention that the placeholder name was Glowforge, and I put Glowforge into that original list and it wound up winning.
Really?
Through that whole process, which was a spectacular waste of time. And the way that Glowforge happened was I was just going like, light and making things. What are some interesting words for those? How could I put them together and find something that was available? And I remember I was driving home. I live in Seattle. I was driving home across I-90, and I was like, I wonder if Glow and Forge are available. I will check that domain name when I get home. And I did, and it was. And I was like, that's a fine placeholder name until we find the right one.
That is hilarious. So it actually ended up being the one. And I was going to ask you, what was that website, that crowdsourcing kind of competition website for domains? Because that's really interesting.
I can't remember. I'm going to look it up and I'll send it to you and you can add it to the show notes.
Yeah, we'll do that. But that is great. And I think it definitely stuck. I mean, sometimes it's just one of those things. It's like a gut thing that just sticks with you and it just happens to be the best outcome. Dan, I feel like we could talk for several more hours about so many different kinds of things that you've had a hand in. But first of all, one more time, congratulations on the success and what you've done. And hopefully that realization that you are affecting so many people's lives in so many different ways. Just want to extend that thanks to you. Where can people go to check out your book, number one, and also feel free to shout any of the other domain names that might be important for people to listen to or to get and follow your work?
If people want to learn more about the trials and tribulations and hear the story of how I sold SparkBuy to Google because of that random plane conversation, hotseatbook.com will just redirect to the Amazon page. So you can pick that up, published by O'Reilly. It's a little old, but most of the advice and stories there are unfortunately timeless.
Yeah.
The cautionary tales was published in 2016. And if people are excited about starting their own business and being able to hold the business in their hands and go down a track that can work, they can go to glowforge.com. They can pick up a Glowforge Pro, which is the one you see behind me, which is enough to go start a business. One of our employees started on the sales team and she said, I'm just going to give this a shot myself. I'm going to take a month off before I start. And so she launched, I mentioned a cutting board, selling engraved cutting boards to realtors. That wasn't hypothetical. She started that business, called up a bunch of realtor friends, booked $20,000 worth of business in the first month, spent the entire month cranking out cutting boards, and then said, okay, so I guess I can do this. Now I'm going to take my job at Glowforge and I will be able to sell these things to people with a straight face that no, it really does do all that. So,
oh, that's amazing.
And then we have our new Glowforge Aura, which is a craft laser. So it's not for running a business. It's about 10 times slower. It's not meant for all day workhorse, but it is delightful. And my kids use it to create earrings and t-shirts and all sorts of amazing, fun and beautiful objects. And it's truly a delight. That's at glowforge.com.
That's awesome. Well, we were thinking of picking something up for our house and our kids to play with. So I'll have to look at the Aura. I think that's pretty new, right? So
right up the alley. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. To finish up here, Dan, I want to go back to that game board forum that you went to where you were being called a Yahoo for this space that you didn't really belong in, at least from their point of view. If you had a chance to sit down and chat with them a little bit, what would you say to them? And, I know this would come from a place of, hey, I'm here to help you, because they obviously were stuck in their own world and were being gatekeepers in the space and perhaps even a little bit jealous. But how, with your CEO mindset, best help somebody who's in that position? What would you say to them?
I would say you're completely and totally right. I don't deserve to be here. And I got here because I cheated. You should cheat too.
What do you mean by that?
Because there's actually no such thing as cheating in this world. You've got to find some advantage that you have that everybody else who's knocking on the same doors doesn't have. Whether it's going to a conference and talking to every single person who's there because you have no other choice not to do it. Whether it's because you buy a tool that most people don't know exists and you leverage that. Whether it's because you email every human being you've ever met on planet Earth and say, I just launched my Kickstarter, you should go pay attention. You have to find something that is unique to you, some piece of your experience, some piece of your story, some piece of your history, something that's special. You have to figure out how to use that to make your experience, your company, your business, your side hustle, how to make it different, how to make it special. My daughter wants to start and is starting a business selling earrings on Etsy. And she's like, I don't think I want to tell people I'm a teenage girl. And I said, honey, it is totally up to you. But you know what? You need to be different than every other person out there. And that's something that's different, and that's something that's special. And so saying like, I am a kid who is out there starting a business for myself, and here's why it's important, like that's going to make you different. And finding something, not running the playbook, not going through the checklist, or not stopping there, but taking it one step further to find some piece of magic that you can call your own. It doesn't have to be a lot. I gave a talk to her high school class about entrepreneurship. And the first thing I said was, look, here's the way it works. You figure out what your ethics are. You figure out what the laws are. And once you do, then there's no such thing as cheating. So for the purpose of this next hour when I'm talking to you, I want your phones out. I want you to have ChatGPT open. I want you to ask your neighbors for answers. I want you to, there's no such thing as cheating. Anything you can do that's consistent with your values and following the law, anything you can do, you do to go find that advantage for your business. And that's what I would say to them. I would say you did all the right things, but you also need to do one or two things beyond the checklist, because ultimately that's how you stand out, and that's how you build that success for the business that matters to you.
Thank you, Dan. This has been an absolute pleasure and an honor. I appreciate you. Congratulations on the success, and I look forward to hearing the response from the audience here. So have an amazing day, and thank you once again.
Thanks so much, Pat. It's been a pleasure.
All right, definitely check out Dan Shapiro's book, Hot Seat, the Startup CEO Guidebook, as well as his website and, of course, the Glowforge. And after we finished the call, he said, Pat, forgot to share this, but I'm going to share it with you now. He said, if any of you are curious about the Glowforge and are potentially wanting to invest in one on your own and you want one, he has a discount. Actually, if you go to glowforge.com/FOD, which is Friends of Dan, you can get it at the cheapest price, which I thought was super generous. It's not an affiliate link or anything, just glowforge.com/FOD. So thank you so much for that, Dan. I really appreciate that. And we'll have all the links and everything to his website, his book, and of course, Robot Turtles. Definitely check out. Just really cool stories. And I think it just shows that there's not often just a playbook that you follow to success. Sometimes you have to, like he said, cheat, or as I often say, use your unfair advantage to your advantage. I think a lot of us have unfair advantages that we just don't use to our advantage. So go and do that, and go and check out the show notes at smartpassiveincome.com/session737. Again, smartpassiveincome.com/session737. Thank you so much. Take care, and I look forward to serving you in the next episode. Cheers. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, by the way.
Thank you so much for listening to the Smart Passive Income podcast at smartpassiveincome.com. I'm your host, Pat Flynn. Sound editing by Duncan Brown. Our senior producer is David Grabowski, and our executive producer is Matt Gartland. The Smart Passive Income podcast is a production of SPI Media and a proud member of the Entrepreneur Podcast Network. Catch you next week. Look, I get it. You want to grow your business, but trying to sell to hundreds or even thousands of people gets very exhausting very fast. But what if you could sell at scale with a simple, powerful quiz? ScoreApp helps you sell to more people without adding more to your plate. You build a quiz or assessment that your audience actually wants to take. Then they answer a few quick questions and get a personalized result right away. It shows them where they're at and what they need to do next and how you can help. And you build huge amounts of trust before you make even a single offer. No hard sell, no chasing leads, just value at scale. Get 50% off the first 3 months using the discount code SPI. All you have to do is just head to scoreapp.com/SPI. Again, that's scoreapp.com/SPI. Hey there, quick pause here because I have to tell you about a tool that completely transforms the podcasting workflow, Riverside. I get it. I used to juggle multiple platforms just to record one podcast episode. It was exhausting. Zoom for recording, Audacity for editing, and then a bunch of different apps just to create clips and social posts. I've tried other ones as well. They were okay, but they were clunky and super time consuming. That's where Riverside has massively helped. I can do it all in one place: recording, editing, repurposing, one platform, one streamlined flow. I just log in, record with my guests no matter where they are in the world, and just like that, studio quality audio and high resolution video all in one. And get this, even if your Wi-Fi glitches, Riverside records locally on your device so everything sounds and looks crystal clear. But here's my favorite feature, Riverside's AI editing tool. You can remove silences and filler words with just one click, hours saved. With Magic Clips, Riverside also automatically finds the best best moments and turns them into ready-to-post videos for YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, all without the extra editing. So if you're looking to level up your production quality and simplify your workflow, go to smartpassiveincome.com/Riverside and use code SMART to get 1 month free on the Pro plan. That's smartpassiveincome.com/Riverside, promo code SMART. It's built by creators for creators, and I think you're going to love it.